So I would say turn on your temple ears for a minute. The temple teaches us that masculinity presides, and feminists agree, but they don't know it.
I don't even know how to sum this up, Cardon. So much.
That was actually discovered on a mummy in Egypt. When you think of the role of a woman, especially as a mother, and you think of how women, for 9 months, you are planning on that baby. Our world today really maligns masculinity.
Yep.
And you don't really hear much about good masculinity. You hear about toxic masculinity. But I think what we see is that creation requires both the masculine and the feminine.
No, my mind is blown.
When you think of the purpose of a shelter, it's there to protect, right? That's a very masculine role. They're intertwined as a serpent, which is interesting, and we won't go into that right now.
Yep.
The male is holding a square, and the queen is holding a compass, and all around them are star charts.
Because this isn't just the symbolism of man and woman. This is within our own being, within our own body. We should have our masculinity presiding.
All of the scriptural references used in this episode will be brought to you by scripturenotes.com. For a free trial to Scripture Notes, please visit the link in the description.
Welcome back, you lovely listeners of WardRadio. Even you hate watchers, thank you so much for the views. I am Brittany the Shadow, and I am in the WardRadio studio. Joining me via Zoom, we have Tikla and Andrea. And they are going to be guiding us in a discussion today of male and female symbolism within the temple. Who wants to start? Tikla, you want to take it away?
I'll take it. I am so excited. Andrea, I'm a big fan of yours. Am I allowed to say that? How do you describe a scripture, kindred spirit? Someone you're like, oh, I want to be in a scripture study group with them. That's how I feel about Andrea.
Yeah, so
this is a real treat. So I have some theories, and I'm hoping you guys will push back a little bit because I don't know. I'm just exploring and excited to be learning. And so if I say something you don't agree with, then let me know. I have some theories that I want to bounce off of you. But before we get into it, I think it bears noting that, and this is something I've talked about a little bit on a couple other episodes, is I feel like we've lost some symbolic literacy culturally. Mm-hmm. And I don't know exactly when or why that happened, but I feel like we used to, even as Americans, we used to have more symbols that were kind of generally recognized and that we would express things through. And we've lost a lot of that. I even have in the Discord, I've got the seal of the United States, which I think is a really interesting case study in this. We used to develop seals for our country that had all of these intricate meanings, all demonstrated visually. And now I think we look at a lot of that and we think, oh, just wipe it all, make it minimalist, or kind of pare it down to almost nothing till it's just kind of sterile and scientific. And do you have any thoughts on that?
So there's a quote from a book by Joseph McConkie and Don Perry that I love that I think really touches on this. And they said, let me pull it up here. It says, symbols are the language in which all gospel covenants and all ordinances of salvation have been revealed. From the time we are immersed in the waters of baptism to the time we kneel at the altar of the temple in the ordinance of eternal marriage, every covenant we make will be written in the language of symbolism. So I think you're absolutely right that symbols really are a language. And learning to speak that language is something that we are losing as a culture, I think, for a lot of reasons. I think some of it grows out of the Enlightenment and this idea that everything can be known and understood, and it's all logic and it's rationality, and everything should boil down to an equation or a recipe. And so we've kind of stripped the mystery and the stories from our culture. And you see that in religious traditions as well, where a lot of faiths, I think, have separated themselves from a rich liturgy and gone to kind of a flattened out theology. And I don't mean that with any disrespect, but it just becomes almost a recipe theology. And I think that grows out of some of the Enlightenment ideas. And
it's interesting you say stripping the mystery away, because I think that's something I can recognize even culturally. Like you are supposed to teach kids nowadays that they shouldn't keep secrets.
Right.
Which I think is really interesting, because obviously for good reason, because there's yucky secrets. Mm-hmm. But we've almost vilified all secrets, all mysteries, all covering, all modesty, everything that was once covered, whether it was because it was bad or good. Mm-hmm. It's now none of that. Everything's out in the open. There's no more mystery. We want to know everything.
I think we've lost our sense of the sacred. Yes. That everything, it should be known by everyone. And we also, we live in the information age, right? You can look anything up at any time. And so we start to get the sense that anything that is shrouded is therefore bad. And anything that is symbolic or hidden is bad or made up or
has bad motives.
Right. Yeah. So I think we've lost that attachment to some of those stories and those myths that tie us back to the ancients and to some really beautiful, powerful understandings.
Yeah, I think it's also how I feel like we've lost human connection, right? We used to live in tribes and villages and we would all gather around and talk. And now we're all in our individual homes and we're all so busy because we're all so stressed out. And so I think we've lost, now the church and most things are just, like you were saying, a recipe where it's like very streamlined and it's you show up, you're spoon fed and you leave, but there's no really questions or deep thoughts or, I don't know.
Yeah. And I think we see this trend showing up as in a lot of faiths. I think we have this problem sometimes in our own faith and others where this rich liturgical understanding of theology has been flattened out and stripped out into more of a self-help framework. And I think in doing that, we lose our connection to one another and to a higher power because those symbols, that language of symbolism conveys so much meaning that transcends what just mere mortal language could convey.
Yes, exactly. Well, and I love that description of symbolic things because it's something that stands the test of time. Like no matter what your culture, no matter what time you lived on earth, no matter who you are, what gender you are, anything, you will resonate with it. Right. If you can grasp even a little bit of it. And sometimes it only takes like a tiny little crack in the door to say, hey, this is what this means. And then suddenly it blows your mind wide open and you realize, oh, there was all of this exciting understanding waiting for me and I had no idea. Right. I just thought it was a bunch of weird.
And I think that in our church, that's something that we struggle with, especially when it comes to the temple, because we have the temple on one hand, but on the other, we live in this culture that is very devoid of symbols and rejects symbols. And so that makes us uncomfortable with symbolic learning.
Yes.
And blocks our understanding of the richness that we have available in the temple.
Yep. And I think we also keep it sacred, right? So we don't share a lot of what goes on in the temple. And I think that served us okay when the culture around us was giving us symbolic literacy and tools to be able to understand what was going on. Whereas now I think there's less of that. And now we have more openness about the temple in a really negative way. Mm-hmm. And so like, I remember the first time I stumbled across someone who had secretly videoed the temple and put it online. And I had been engaging with anti-Mormon content for a while at that point. So I thought it wouldn't affect me. I thought, oh yeah, people did that. That's rude, whatever. But I had a full-on meltdown that night. Like I sobbed with my husband. I was like, what is going on? Like, what, am I embarrassed? Like, why did this affect me so much? And I realized I feel violated. Mm-hmm. I feel like someone hid a camera in my bedroom or in my living room, in my kitchen. Like someone came into a place that is so sacred to me and is now just ripping off all of its, like I felt violated.
Right. Yeah.
And so I want to be hesitant as we dive into this topic That's not what we're trying to do here. We want to treat this very sacredly, but in the same way, I think we used to not be, well, and probably still are, not great at sex ed all the time, to be kind of graphic. Like, we're not always good about talking about these things.
There's another topic idea.
Oh, what's that?
So there's another topic idea.
Let's do it. How to talk to kids about sex. Whereas now we can't get away with that anymore because kids learn about it online. Like, they will learn about it if you don't teach them. Right. They won't get to learn it for the first time necessarily on their own. And so I think in that same way, we have to teach the temple a little bit more explicitly than we maybe have in the past, not because we're making light of it, but because it's so important and sacred that we need to be prepared and ready and have the tools that we need to be able to get excited about it. So
yeah,
exactly. A little disclaimer.
Yeah, I like, a light bulb just went on. Like, you shouldn't, the first time you hear about the temple should not be in your temple prep class, right? You should be prepped way before that. Yeah,
I think so. And we've been given a little bit of explicit permission to do that lately. Right. Apostles have been more clear. Like, the only things you shouldn't share are the things that you've covenanted not to share. Right. And so we can be reverently overt in some ways. So
right. Well, and I think your point is very valid, and it's important to consider that while we don't reveal anything that we've covenanted not to reveal, because those are sacred, at the same time, I mean, so I live in Arizona. I was at the Gilbert, Arizona temple during the open house and all of that. And there was a man every day standing on the street corner next to the temple in full temple garb, with his protest sign. And I felt like you did, Tikla, where I just felt sick to my stomach. Like, he's making this look so, on the one hand, silly and foolish, but on the other hand, kind of nefarious. It's none of those things. It's beautiful and it's sacred. And going back, so I think it's important to recognize that is where the world is at this point, that those things are out in the open. And that doesn't mean we should be out in the open with it, but we need to help those who are maybe struggling to understand, or, some of the youth preparing to go through the temple, or converts preparing to go through the temple, to recognize that these things aren't something that Joseph Smith just came up with. They aren't random symbols. These symbols are deeply embedded in ancient symbology, and they are part of that symbolic language that, going back to that quote from Brother McConkie and Brother Perry, is that this language of symbolism is part of covenant making, and those covenants are what are so sacred, and because they create that sacred relationship with our Savior and with our Father in heaven. And so I think acknowledging that, yes, this stuff is out in the open, and then shining a light on the beauty and the ancient character of these things will help to hopefully dispel some of the toxic mist of darkness that someone cast around it.
Okay, so there's so many ways we could go with episodes like this. I think the biggest challenge is just going to be, stay focused. Like, let's just hone in on this one little topic. And so I want to tackle what I believe could be representative male or masculine and feminine symbols in the temple. Now, this isn't an overt thing we're taught, so I want to give a little bit of my backing for this theory that there are masculine and feminine symbols in the temple. So we'll start with a symbol. Ooh, and even before I get into squares, I'm going to do a shout out to an artist I just discovered that I am obsessed with. I don't know if you guys have heard of Brittany, Andrea. Have you guys heard of the Library of Godwin?
No.
You've seen this guy? Oh my goodness. Okay. He's a Latter-day Saint, and he's doing these kind of black and white ink style drawings, and it's super esoteric. And he's got one, we can pull that. I found him on Facebook. I need to find out where to buy this guy's art because it's so fun. He's doing one for every Come Follow Me week. And now he's going to do an illuminated Book of Mormon with all of his artwork. Anyway, if you see in the Discord at the very top here, under the Library of Godwin, I have his representation of the plan of salvation. Are you able to see that from where you are, Andrea?
Let's see.
You can see it in the...
Taking a look.
We just have to pull that up on the screen. There's too much to go into, but this is a guy who I think he's a young guy, and he has symbolic literacy. This guy gets it. And so I just got so excited looking at this. Like, we have our little plan of salvation, you know, that we teach our kids, where it's like, oh, and here's the little earth, and here's the, no, this is the plan of salvation. Like, this is, so good. So check him out. Everybody go check him out.
That is some rich imagery there.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
We could do like a whole episode on just that plan of salvation image right there, that's what's so cool about symbols, is you could stare at that for a lifetime. Yeah. So cool.
Symbols are always multifaceted. And so I think we need to acknowledge that anything we say here is not like the one for one meaning of
Oh, exactly.
Yes. They're so multi-layered. And this is why I think, you know, in the temple, they don't say, okay, now we're going to show you this symbol and it means this. It's a process of discovery and revelation. So just want to put that out there.
You know, I'm so glad. That's absolutely true. So I'm honing in very narrowly on a couple symbols and some things I think we can learn. So the first one is the square. The square is a shape. It's a perfect shape because it's symmetrical. It has 4 corners representing 4 corners of the earth, perhaps. The earth is not square, but it has 4 cardinal directions. And it's often referred to as, you know, 4 corners of the earth, gathering in from the 4 corners of the earth, things like this. And the tool that is used to make a perfect square is also called a square. So there's a carpentry geometric tool called a square, and it's just an L shape. It has one that goes up, one to the side to make that perfect right angle. And if you're wanting to study, well, I think the cross is actually a symbol of the square, or an echo of the square as well. Obviously, so in the Discord, I have a ton of different crosses. And the cross, interestingly enough, has been a symbol way before Christ came. It did not show up on the scene when Christ came. It was already there. And I think we're not even sure that Christ was crucified on a cross. But the cross has become a symbol of that. And I think for very deliberate reasons, because it has this representation of justice, of righteousness, the right in righteousness.
Okay, hold on. Tikla.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before. We don't know if Jesus was crucified on a cross?
Well, it might have been a pole or a tree.
I've always thought it was just a cross.
Yeah, there's different philosophies on that, or different thoughts on that. I don't think we know for sure.
It could have been.
The Romans certainly used crosses. They used other things as well. But there's a lot of symbolism in pulling and thinking that this was some form of a tree.
Okay. I hope I'm not the only one in the comments and everyone's like, Brittany the Shadow, you're really dumb.
Sure.
Archaeologically, there's not a lot of evidence for the traditional looking cross. Usually men were nailed their top half to the top of a pole and the bottom half to the bottom of the pole. To create a cross was not an efficient use of materials, especially if you were just going to kill people. So the vast majority of people that were crucified on a stick, for lack of a better term. There's no reason to think from a sterilized secular perspective that Jesus Christ was any different. However, we all hold the symbology of the cross for its representation of the crucifixion.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
I'll edit that part out. I apologize.
Okay.
No, keep it in. Keep it in. That was great. Man behind the curtain speaks. Thank you for presiding at this meeting, Cardon. Very nice to have you here.
Mr. Know-it-all. Gosh.
So the cross is a symbol of, this sacrifice, but also this justice that was carried out. Justice on our behalf. The justice that was meant for us, that is now his to bear. And then, of course, we've got the square earth, the corners of the earth. And even if you think of like a scale of justice, it's got a bar across and a support, got a scale in there too, right. That is representative of that. And so it's kind of and a few more words that I've discovered. If you want to study the scriptures, looking for explanations about the square, and understanding it more deeply, some of the words that I've found that I think are associated are words like uphold. Mm-hmm. So if you think about the right side and holding up or even if you imagine you're in a court situation where you want to be sworn, you need to be sworn in, you would put a hand on a Bible and you would put your hand to the square, that square representing, this true justice setting and the truth being told. Mm-hmm. So it's very angular. It's very unstable. It's unmoving. Very, what are the other words I've got here? So upright, uphold, righteous, and square are really fun dives into the scriptures if you want to go there.
And I would add to that some more words to go with this idea of square, especially when you think of it using an actual square as a tool, like a builder would use, is foundation. And look at when the scriptures talk about a foundation. A foundation has to be laid out square, because if you don't, the rest of the building will be off kilter and it throws everything else off.
Fall down.
So that foundation has to be square. And my understanding is when you look at stonemasons, which Christ was probably a stonemason, not a carpenter. They didn't do a lot of carpentry in his area back in those days. They did a lot more building from stone.
I didn't know that
there's
either.
actually a mistranslation in Matthew 13:15 when it says he was the son of a carpenter. It should say, a better translation is probably the son of a builder. And they were building with stone there. They would actually use a square, not so much for cutting the stone, but for laying out the stones to make sure that as they built the walls of a building, that those walls were coming together correctly. So they'd use the square as they were constructing it, and make sure that things were in alignment. So when I think of that, I think of, getting a foundation that's square. A foundation creates a shelter.
Hold on. We got to go back to this Christ was a stonemason thing. That is so interesting because there's so many scripture terms that make so much more sense if that's true.
Right.
Like cornerstone and
why the builders rejected the stone.
Built upon a rock.
Right.
Whoa.
Yeah. So you even get to like Matthew 16:18 when Christ is there with his apostles and he's giving them the priesthood power. And he says, I will build my church upon this rock.
Right.
And there's so much symbolism in that, but he's probably standing on the foundation, like a bedrock there. It's at Caesarea Philippi. And if you've ever been there or seen it, there's this huge rock face with a cave, and there's a natural spring of water, like living water flowing out of the rock. I mean, like, get the symbolism here, right, of Christ and the living water. And he says, upon this foundation or this stone, the word there is, there's two Greek words that it plays on with Petra and Petros. And, that's where the Apostle Peter gets his name. Before that, he was Simon. Now he's Peter.
Yeah.
So there's something there about the stone and having the stone square and having things precise and accurate, because that's what you need to create the building and to create the shelter.
Wow.
Jeez.
So, sorry, I'm reeling. That's so cool. So I think also this association with ordination and priesthood in that case, right? These, this rock, all of these things that are being built together are representative of the structure by which the church will be led, which is that part that's very sturdy. It's something you can use as your guide. I've also seen, the two great commandments are love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, might, mind, and strength. And the second is like unto it. And I've seen love thy neighbor as thyself. And I've seen like the cross depicted with the upright beam representing the first great commandment, and then the cross beam representing the second great commandment, which I think that the square is most symbolic of that first commandment.
Right.
That one that keeps everything straight and square, so that in order to allow that second commandment to be realized, right? Yeah. Because you have that, you can have the other commandment. They are One is for the purpose of the other. And
I love that symbolism. Yeah. So I think that you're totally right. Like the stone and the square, I think really bring to mind a sense of like stability, order, reliability. That and it's interesting when you look at, like I said, these are some really ancient symbols. And I think there's an image on the Discord of a square that has a plumb bob hanging off of it.
Oh yeah.
So
it's toward the bottom or middle.
Yeah. So that's used to make sure things are balanced, right? That was actually discovered on a mummy in Egypt.
Cool.
That's like thousands of years old. It was like a little amulet that was on there, but it was a functional square. You have to wonder, why did the Egyptians bury someone with that?
Yeah. Well, and that bob, isn't the purpose of that, it's free swinging. So it's essentially aligning the square with the actual earth, like the gravitational pull of the earth. So when you're aligning your square, there's that there.
Right. So everything is in alignment. Everything is precise. Everything is balanced. And those are all necessary. That kind of order is necessary for building a structure.
Yes. So I would say turn on your temple ears for a minute. And if we were to think of this kind of stability being symbolic of the right side, the righteous side, or the right side, not righteous side, but the right side of a being, and then there being that plumb bob that kind of takes the structure and not just aligns it with itself, but then aligns it with earth, may be representative of humility before God, or that bowing and kneeling before God in that position of authority, of presiding, of stability, also being tied with this plumb that is representative of the humility that you must align yourself with God in order to be square.
Yes.
For someone to be able to build.
Yes, that's perfect. That the square isn't enough in and of itself. It has to be aligned to something else.
And so if you have, this is now my theory that this symbol is a deeply masculine symbol. And so if you have the, men who preside, if they are only oriented to themselves, then they will not be in alignment. They will not have true power or authority from God. But when they are in line with God, then they are prepared to serve that role of stability, of upholding, of uprightness that can be relied upon because it's so steady.
Yeah, they help to create that sure foundation and that alignment that's necessary for building a proper shelter.
Oh, so fun.
When you think of the purpose of a shelter, it's there to protect, right? That's a very masculine role.
Yes.
But you cannot fulfill that role of protector if you are not in alignment. And I think, I don't know if you want to get into like a political discussion, but our world today really maligns masculinity. Yep. And you don't really hear much about good masculinity. You hear about toxic masculinity.
Right.
And certainly there are ways that these roles of masculine and feminine are twisted and misunderstood. But I think acknowledging that there is a masculinity that can protect and provide, like the Proclamation on the Family says, when that's aligned to God, it's a very necessary and very protective thing.
Yep. And what's the point of building a house if not to fill it?
Right.
And so the point of the house, the point of the structure, the point of the masculine is to be filled with the feminine, not to be of its own, in its own. And yeah.
It's creating a sacred space.
Yes. Yes.
We think of even a stone builder, like they're building a house or a place of worship or something, that's a dedicated space for a family, and that's sacred. And that's the purpose of true masculinity.
It's to create space for the sacred. Oh, so good. Anything else on squares before we move on?
I think that's great. Oh, well, okay. I was going to say, so this, I mentioned that a square with the plumb bob was found on an Egyptian mummy, multiple, I think. It's also found in tapestries and mosaics. predate Christ. So like there's some in Ravenna and a church in Ravenna, Italy that dates back to early Christian times. And you see some of these symbols in those mosaics. They even found it on some fabric scraps from Masada. And if you know what Masada is, it's where some of the Sicarii back in the time of Christ, we don't want to go too far down this road, but they had gone to Masada to escape the Romans. They came to an unfortunate end there, but some of the textiles that have been found there also have this ancient religious symbol on them. So it's a symbol that predates Joseph Smith. It predates, it even predates Christ. Yeah. And I think when we talk about Christ being the foundation stone, there's more to that than just a nice metaphor.
Yeah.
And this is something that I've spent some time thinking about is, back in Christ's day, there were people who recognized him as the Messiah. Certainly there were the builders rejected the chief cornerstone. So some rejected him, but some recognized him. And you just have to wonder, why did they recognize him as the Messiah? What was it? Because was it just the miracles? Because the scriptures reference others in that era who were performing miracles. It seems like there's something else that Christ was doing. And I think the scriptures hinted this, that gave them that recognition that he was actually the chief cornerstone. And I will leave it at that.
That's very fun. That's very fun. Okay. So now the symbol that I think is feminine, which is a circle. And also the tool that makes a circle is a compass. That's what is needed to make a perfect circle. You have a point in the middle, which is the point, the whole point of everything. And then stretching out perfectly from that, at perfect distance from that is this, circle, which is also a perfect, just like a square is a perfect shape. It's all symmetrical. A circle is a perfect shape because it's all symmetrical. And the compass as the tool to make a circle is so varied. It has so many other implications too, because it's also the compass in the sense that a compass can orient you, a directional compass, as well as marking on a map between points to find distances between points. And there's some association with compasses and the North Star and different things like that. So the compass is a far more layered and varied symbol, which I think is very well suited for its purpose and its signification and its side of our being, and to femininity, which is sometimes, like I think about the little compass that I have used in geometry to make a really tiny circle or a really big circle. A compass can widen bigger than a square, than a 90-degree angle. It can also be much smaller, and it's always changing. It's varying and it's cycling.
Right.
And so I think already it's very obvious to me that we've got a symbol of femininity here going on.
Yeah.
You won't find many references to circle in the scriptures, but you will find words like encircling, encompassed, and then the root word of compass being, a common root word from compass is also found in compassion. So the compassion is compass, and it's to suffer with, which that's a whole other world of exploration in the scriptures where you can study compassion and I'm sure I had more that I'm not remembering off the top of my head. Any thoughts on circles while I'm reorienting myself?
I have way more than you want.
Well, just give us something.
So I think it's interesting that, when you think of these, really they're kind of tools of building or tools of creation, right?
Yes, tools of cosmic creation.
Yes. They're even tools of just terrestrial creation. If you're going to sit down and build a house, it's interesting to think that a compass, I think, is more used for the planning part, where you're drawing out the blueprints and you're coming up with your plans. Whereas a square, sure, you may use that in the planning phase, but like they would use that square physically on the job site. It's a job site tool, whereas a compass is a planning tool.
Oh, interesting.
And so when you think of feminine roles, I don't know about you. Not all women are planners. I'm a planner and a scheduler, and it kind of drives my husband crazy. But when you think of the role of a woman, especially as a mother, and you think of how women, you know, for 9 months, you are planning on that baby, and preparing, and it's, you know, you think of drawing those circles, and it's a very nurturing idea. You talked about the compassion and encircling.
A hug.
Yeah, it really is. So these are very feminine ideas. And I think that plays out even in nature. So think about a tree. If you look at a tree from the top, it's usually kind of a circular shape, right? Then you see it even in the heavenly bodies. They're all spheres or circles. Even the motion of heavenly bodies, they move in circles and they go in cycles, and the seasons occur in cycles. So this idea of circles has a lot of feminine connotations. And then when you think of it in covenant terms, I love the story of Ruth and Boaz. And she comes to him, and what does she ask him to do? She asks him to put his robe around her, to encircle her. There's so much
this is Brittany's favorite scripture
symbolism
story.
there.
It is. Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
It's a fairy tale.
Yeah, well, and in you know, the circling having a boundary around it, where that boundary pulls people in and you know, brings people close, but it's also, it is still bounded, right? It's a bounded space.
And a bounded space, and it connotes a space of nourishment and of love. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think then we can get into how those two symbols interact with each other. There's this duality there where they're so similar in their symmetry and even the tools used to make them have very strong similarities, and yet they're distinct, and they serve these roles to kind of bring the other one into alignment a little bit. There's a concept called circling the square, and or squaring the circle. And this is the impossible geometric problem. It cannot be solved. You cannot make a square and a circle that are identically or are the same area. And the reason is because circles use pi, which is this infinite number, which circles are infinity and they're spirit, and squares are, you know, embodied earth and these kinds of things. And so because the pi symbol is infinite, like the number is infinite, you can't actually make a square and a circle that are the exact same area. And so it's supposed to be a very meditative process to try to like draw it out and attempt it. It's apparently this very peaceful process of trying to do that. But what I think is really cool is there's actually, I think I have an image of it in the Discord, where by using square roots, you can kind of like take this square and circle and square and circle and square and circle and bring it out and out and out and out. And I saw this and I was just obsessed with it because I think it's such a great example of what we do every day. I think this is enduring to the end. We have this circle space, this feminine nurturing space where we're bringing people in and we're loving everyone and we're kind and we're open and we're nurturing. And then we're starting to feel burnout and we have too much and we're spiraling out of control and there's too much. And then the square comes and bounds it in. The covenant, the commandment, the masculine, the steadying, the realisticness of that kind of bounds it in.
The balancing.
Yeah. And then that gets a little bit too strict and too immobile. And so then the circle comes and surrounds it again with circle. And then this process goes on and on and on and on. And I see in this a symbolic relationship between men and women, because if women are the circle and we cannot be the exact same size as the square, then we have someone has to be on the outside. So if the woman is on the outside, what role is she playing?
Mm-hmm.
She is mother. The circle on the outside means she's mother.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a mother on the outside and a square on the inside, you don't have a partnership. You have a mother and a son.
Right. And so sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, go.
You see this in Nephi's vision of the tree of life in 1 Nephi 11. If you want to, I don't know, I have it right here, but so Nephi has this vision and he sees the tree of life and he wants to know the meaning of it. And we know the tree is actually a very feminine symbol.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1 Nephi 11, verse 8, he says, he saw the tree and the beauty thereof was far beyond exceeding of all beauty, and the whiteness thereof did exceed the whiteness of the driven snow. So that's how he describes this tree. And his spirit guide says, asks him about it. And he says, it's the tree which is precious above all. So you think of those terms that he's using to describe it, precious and this pure white, this beauty, this exceeding beauty. And he wants to know the interpretation of it. And the next thing he sees that's given as the interpretation of it is Mary, the mother of Christ. And the same words are used to describe her, that she was exceedingly fair and white, precious. So it's interesting that he's associating this tree with the mother of Christ, Mary. And the angel asks, do you know who this is that you're seeing? And he says in verse 18, behold, the virgin whom thou seest is the mother of the Son of God, after the manner of the flesh. And that phrase has always intrigued me, after the mother after the manner of the flesh, because it seems to indicate that there's a mother after the manner of the spirit. But here you have a mother in Mary who is, you could say, enrobing the Son in mortal flesh.
Yes.
So there's that.
Very interesting. And that's a good illustration too of how I think these symbols take turns sometimes too. Like sometimes there's Mother Earth. Sometimes the corners of the earth are masculine. Sometimes the earth is mother, is feminine. And so we kind of take turns with these symbols too. And I want to also make the clarification that when I say masculine and feminine, I'm not saying man and woman.
Right.
Which I think we'll get into even more time willing. Because there's a huge difference there. I'm not saying all women are feminine, all men are masculine. That's not what I'm saying at all. But one more thing on this duality, and what else do we have in here on this one? One thing that I just blew my mind about the duality of these two things when I was really thinking deeply about it was we talk about an undeviating course when we want to be following God's commandments and we want to be doing this right and keeping our covenants. And it's, bounded in these covenants that we have. And it's an undeviating course. And I remember thinking, okay, where's the circle in an undeviating course? It's just a line. It seems very square and masculine. Where's the circle? And then it came to me, what is the course of God? What is his course? It is one eternal round.
Right.
The course, the undeviating course, is not a straight line as we know it. I mean,
circle.
It's a circle. His course goes around and around. And so when we think about enduring to the end, it's not just don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up. It's almost like this coming apart and rebounding and coming apart and rebounding. And these things representative in our own body with a left side and a right side, where we've got our right side, which is symbolic of presiding. It's the symbolically dominant side. We've evolved to have a dominant hand. Apparently, it's actually more efficient to have a dominant hand than two hands that are equally proficient. Yes. And so this right hand side is associated with leadership, with assertiveness, with I would say, presiding, providing, and protecting. And then we have the left-hand side, which is the side that brings the beauty, that brings the question, that introduces the newness and the ideas and the wisdom that gets the stability and kind of like clunkiness of the square moving. Like it brings it to life. There in the scriptures, we hear about dry bones as opposed to bones that have marrow in them. It's like the life to the structure,
right,
that we find in the feminine and that brings to the masculine. And so, but where do we find these symbols? It's not that all the women have one and all the men have one. We both have both. Because this isn't just the symbolism of man and woman. This is within our own being, within our own body. We should have our masculinity presiding. That is my theory. What do you think? That's my theory, that within our own being, there is some element of this masculine representation presiding over the feminine.
Yeah, I mean, I think that women certainly tend to the feminine.
Well, yes.
And men tend to the masculine. And it's kind of interesting to look at it. We're all familiar with the yin and yang symbol that's been just totally overused, right? I think it's on every like kind of t-shirt on the beach. But it is an ancient Chinese symbol, and it does convey this idea where you have this masculine and feminine energies that together create a whole. And you even have the dot inside each of them of the other.
Yes.
So, and it makes me think of Adam and Eve, because it says, Eve was taken from Adam's rib. I don't think that was literal, but I think what it indicates is that there's a part of each of them in the other.
Yes.
It's not just a distinct dividing line. It's both are present, maybe in varying degrees in the other, but they're complementary and both are necessary. And it shows up not just in the yin and yang symbol, but if you, let's see, there's an image on the Discord of, there's an image there. There was a better one I wanted to put up, but it shows, it almost looks like a snake wrapping around a pole, and it goes up, and at the top, there's a woman and a man. And so Hugh Nibley actually has this laid out in his book, Temple and Cosmos. If any of the viewers want to pull that up. He has a really good diagram of this image. It's on silk veils that were found in ancient Chinese tombs. And it's supposed to depict the founders of the Chinese people.
Yes, I've seen this.
But it's so interesting because it's a king and a queen. It's the male and the female. They're intertwined as a serpent, which is interesting. And we won't go into that right now.
Yep.
The male is holding a square and the queen is holding a compass. And all around them are star charts. It's very cosmological. And this is how they depict the creation of their world. That you have this masculine and the feminine, they both have their tools of creation, but they're also intertwined.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. I also had a thought. This illustration came to my mind of fishing, where all over the New Testament, Jesus Christ is teaching how to fish, teaching his disciples, telling them, how to fish, where to cast their net. And I kind of think of that as like a yin and yang thing, where he didn't go out and tell the men to go stab the fish in the river, right? He taught them to mend their net. If you think of a net, it's kind of a circle, right? Like you cast your net over and you gather the fish. And I think you have to take care of both, right? You have to plan and be a man and have your boat and mend your net, but then you also have to be quiet when you're fishing and be, mending your net, casting it. I don't know. So I just kind of had that like fishing imagery going on when you guys
Yeah,
are
I
talking
love
about
that. I think we see in so many areas that it really requires both the feminine and the masculine, whether it's in ourselves, whether it's in a marriage partnership, whether it's, a bigger cosmological scale. But I think what we see is that creation requires both the masculine and the feminine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. And when you're endowed with power, you receive the tools with which to create. And I even was looking at the yin yang thinking, usually it's depicted kind of with the dots up and down from each other. But if you were to turn it sideways and you were to emblazon it on your chest, it would be kind of an interesting, it's meant to be moving. The yin yang is intended, it has different seasons, and the direction it's going has implications for what it's symbolic of. But the idea that, the feminine is the one that's kind of pushing, moving it on, moving it forward, putting it in motion. And the masculine is the one that's kind of like keeping it slow enough that it's
keeping it stable.
Yeah. Which I think ties really well into the masculine, feminine symbols that we might find in the temple. And then back to the commandments thing, right? We've got the commandment, the first commandment, even though the first commandment is the first commandment, or we can think of it as the right side, it is for the purpose of making the love thy neighbor as thyself commandment possible. Because I was thinking, because culturally, there's a lot of talk like, well, maybe there doesn't need to be a distinction between men and women, right? What if we're just all people? Which, to be clear, when it says men in the scriptures, it's talking about people, not just men. The word for woman, there was also one for men called weremen. And so if we wanted weremen and women or women, then that would be the distinction. But when it just says man, that is actually inclusive. It is men and women. And I think it's funny how the masculine representation almost always presides. Like I've yet to find an example where it's the feminine representing everyone. It's always the masculine that's able to represent everyone. And I was thinking, well, okay, what about like in the creative world, like actors? Do we ever hear actresses referring to actors and actresses? No.
I think now I think they're all actors.
Yeah, they're all actors.
That's where we've gone with it. Yeah.
They're all actors. You wouldn't use actress to refer to everyone. Or I was thinking, okay, what about like the LGBTQ community, right? They're super into the margins. They want like this all to be really equal for everyone. But we still call it gay marriage, not lesbian marriage. Like there's still that masculine presiding where that symbol is more universal. It's less distinguished. And so it can represent everyone. So it's interesting that the duality of the yin and yang is so often like a peace symbol, because when you find scriptures that are overtly temple scriptures that have these masculine and feminine representations in the words, I've discovered even just like mercy and justice and all of these dualities, these proving polarity or contraries, if you've listened to any Jared Halbertson, these things, the reward for getting it right is almost always peace.
Right.
A crown of peace.
When we find the actual balance, and when those forces are in balance, that's when they are creative. That's when things are accomplished. And when we move forward, those things are balanced.
And it's not fast. It's not rushed. It's not stressed or desperate. It's this very calm, like back and forth, this just rhythm. Oh, it's just really cool. So if you think, when I go to the temple, I'm often wondering, do I need to be motivated to go, or do I need to be slowed and steadied? And I think thinking about that, even as I put on my clothes for the day, can be a really peaceful practice, can be a really centering and peaceful thing to do. Yeah. And so now's the part where I get a little snarky. Are you going to be okay, Andrea?
I love snarky.
So I've made it no mystery that I am not a huge fan of modern feminism, because it's misnamed as it is. Like there's nothing feminine, there's no femininity about it anymore. So If you're going to stick up for femininity, then what are you doing? But I think something really fascinating is happening where everyone has identified feminism is actually just trying to make women into men. I think that's universally understood now. And I think as a result, people are pushing back, maybe especially men are pushing back and women and saying, okay, feminism is bad. Women need to be feminine. That is the solution. Like, get rid of this whole masculine woman thing and women need to be feminine. That will solve all of our problems. Mm-hmm. But I think actually the temple has our solution because I think feminism is selling a half truth. There is a real truth that there are women who are so feminine that they don't have any assertiveness. They don't have any boundaries. They don't have any ways of standing up for themselves, which all of those words I just described are what? Very right-hand side, square words. But because they don't, they're actually less able to engage with the other side of humanity. They actually do need to learn some assertiveness, how to not be a doormat, how to speak what they know, how to be wise, how to be fully developed as a strong woman. But even as feminists are saying, women, be more assertive, don't be a doormat, speak your truth. What are they telling women to do?
Well, they're telling them to become men.
Well, yes, but they're saying let masculinity preside.
Right.
Let masculinity preside. Mm-hmm. And that part they have right. I think we do need to have a masculine on our right side, even as women, because it frees our feminine side. Mm-hmm. When we have a boundary, we can be open-hearted. When there's a justice system, we can look after the poor and needy.
Yeah, that's when we can have mercy, is when there is justice.
Yes, when there's justice, we can have mercy. When we're aligned with God, we can love our neighbor. Mm-hmm. Because if the commandment was just love everyone, feminine would be presiding and it would be chaos. Mm-hmm. You can't just love everyone unless you love God first. Then you know how to love your neighbor.
And likewise, if everything was justice, there would not be love and mercy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's where you get tyrannical. And so I think that's why, like, as much as I think the yin and yang symbol has been overused, I think it does show something important, that there is while the feminine and masculine energies are very important and distinct, at the same time, there's a bit of each in the other.
Yep, exactly. And I think we learned that in the temple. Mm-hmm. And so where the feminists go wrong, I would say, is that they don't stop there at just helping some women who need to become more assertive, become assertive, and some men who need to integrate some femininity, integrate it. They then say, but actually, this masculine is bad on a larger scale. Mm-hmm. It's good for inside a woman. It's bad for a man and bad for the world. Right. And that's where the lie is getting twisted into it. And so I think we can call it out a little bit and say, oh, no, you think masculinity should preside. Otherwise, you would be elevating femininity as the thing that should lead.
Right.
You don't talk much about femininity.
Right. Mm-hmm. I think it's a femininity where the masculinity has created the proper space for that to function. Right. Just like men, they need that correct amount of the feminine spirit within them to balance the justice. It's where justice and mercy meet, right? So going back to this idea of some of the ancient symbolism of these things, there's a symbol that's been probably referred to too often as the seal of Melchizedek. It probably had nothing to do with Melchizedek, but it is two squares that are overlaid. And so I don't know if you can see this very well. I don't know if it'll show up on the camera. This is a necklace that, let's see, will it come in here? Ooh. I don't know if it'll show very well.
I can kind of see it.
Kind of see it a little bit?
Yeah.
So I actually picked this up when I had the opportunity to go live in France for a year when I was in college, and went down to Toledo, Spain, where one of their they have this rich history of artisans that do inlaid gold. And I was a starving college student, but I walked past this little shop in Toledo and saw this necklace there. And I thought, well, it's small, so maybe it's barely in the budget. It wasn't, but I bought it anyway. And I'm glad I did. And because there was something about it that just intrigued me and it called out to me. And it is that symbol that we refer to as the seal of Melchizedek with these two overlaid squares. But if you notice, it's also has a circle inside. And probably we won't dig into the symbolism of this here tonight, but I think what it's showing is that these squares come together and they make a circle. And so it's this ultimate union of that masculine and feminine, and that those are both needed for creation to happen. And whether it's creation within ourselves or it's on a cosmic scale, that those point us towards those creative attributes.
Yeah. And I just always have to give a little plug to just thank you to the priesthood, the men who are ordained to priesthood offices in the church, who uphold the church, who allow me to express femininity because I know I'm safe to do so. And this happens on a church level, and a neighborhood level, on a marriage level. When there are righteous, strong, masculine, true masculine men, the feminine side is free.
Yeah.
It's free to express and safe to express. And so we can do a much better job as women in being assertive in our love for the tender, divine softness of femininity. But as soon as it's expressed in leadership, it becomes a masculine feature. And so I'm just so grateful that we have that masculine symbol represented in our men who take care of our women. And I would never want that to change. And so thank you to all of you incredible ministering brothers out there, and to your counterpart and your sisters. It's a beautiful, magical, sacred union. And when we get it right, there's peace.
Andrea, question. With that seal of Melchizedek, your necklace, I also was thinking, could that be symbolic of like Heavenly Father and Jesus protecting our Heavenly Mother? Like on all angles?
I think there's a lot of symbolism there of both the divine feminine and the divine masculine.
Yeah.
And how they work together. Yeah, that symbol, it turns up in some ancient spaces. There's some debate about what it means. It may be a rosette that actually appears in some significant places on some robes that Egyptian mummies were wearing. So there's definitely some deep symbolism there that I don't think we have quite unlocked yet. I think that's yet to be revealed.
Okay. Cool. All right. I don't even know how to sum this up, Cardon. So much. Okay. I'll just say,
are we crazy, Brittany? What do you think?
No, like my mind is blown. Like I learned so many things. Anyway, just thank you for hanging out with us. Let us know your thoughts and opinions and comments in the comment section below. This has been great. This has been another episode of Ward Radio, the women of Ward Radio. We'll see you in the next program.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. We assume if you made it this far that you liked our content, so please make sure you like this video and you share it with your friends. Now, in order to keep this content flowing freely, we need your help. If you're a person of means, please check us out on Venmo, the CashApp, or Zelle, and consider a direct contribution to the channel. Or you could always go to WardRadio.com and sign up for our newsletter there and receive all of our latest Ward Radio news articles directly to your inbox. And while you're there, maybe consider purchasing some merch. We have some really cool hats, some really cool shirts, so you can strut your stuff and support the channel that way. Or if you're a kind of person that wants to just help out with some of the equipment in the studio, we have an Amazon wish list linked in the description as well. And don't forget scripturenotes.com. You have to read your scriptures daily, and scripturenotes.com is frankly the coolest way to study your scriptures, and they're a very generous sponsor of this channel. So please consider a free trial with scripturenotes.com. The link to Scripture Notes will also be in the description of this video. Either way, whether you're pressing this little button right here to subscribe to our channel and share it with your friends, or whether you are actually hitting this button right here just to watch another video, we look forward to seeing you in the next program.